What do you guys call it?
A doona.
A dooner.
Yeah.
That's great. That was my nickname growing up.
What, doona?
Yeah, my dad called me Dooner.
That's a good name. Why did he call you that? Because you were warm and comforting?
No, because the word Dooner has no connotation to a blanket to us. And that's what his parents called him. Somehow it's short for David in their minds. I don't know. But yeah, I've never heard of Dooner being used to refer to a comforter.
Yeah, I think it's an Australian and New Zealand thing.
Although I was also surprised to learn that you guys just use the word crikey in casual conversation.
Did I send that to you at some point?
Yeah, you did. I think it was in response to that recording a podcast on an iPad article.
Yep. That's right, yeah, I sent back crikey.
I thought it was just Steve Irwin's catchphase or something. I didn't realize that it was a common.
No, it's daily use. Maybe not by everyone, but I do. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the r/Apple Show, David.
And welcome to you, James.
It sounds like you've never been on the show before, but you've actually been on nearly every single episode for an entire year.
That's right.
That's crazy that we're pushing a year. This is our 24th show in our 50th week.
Yeah, our first episode was at the very beginning of January. I'm not sure what day, but we're coming right up on a year at this point. So we got some pretty special stuff coming up in the next few weeks to celebrate that, I think.
Yeah, we sure do. We'll keep that as a little teaser, hey?
Okay, yeah, we'll leave it at
that. So, one of the top posts on the Apple subreddit in the past week is a supply chain report that says that Apple will be using a new form of screen technology to make at least one of its 2019 iPhone models thinner and lighter, a trend that they've bucked with recent flagship versions. And the technology is touch capacitive layer built into the OLED screen instead of a separate layer. Do you remember back when screens went from the 3GS to the iPhone 4, and it was kind of because they laminated the touch layer and the glass onto the LCD? I'm hoping for another little improvement like that, because that improvement alone led to like an incredible display. Not only because it was going from non-retina to retina, but that like the thinness of the glass, or the thinness of the entire component from top to bottom, leads to I don't want to say magical, but you can turn like your iPhone and have these crazy viewing angles and things that it just didn't have on the older generation of LCD back in the day.
Man, if there's an order of magnitude improvement like that, I would be blown away. On the surface, this story doesn't sound extremely interesting because, of course, Apple is going to use newer parts and try to make their phones thinner if they can, and they get the added benefit of it sounds like this is going to be a cheaper technology than a separate touch layer and a display. So it's kind of a win-win for them and kind of a given that they'd go this direction. The interesting thing for me is that apparently Samsung actually pitched this technology to Apple themselves, and it sounds like they did it in an attempt to get 100% of the manufacturing contract for Apple's displays, because right now Samsung's still their only manufacturer for displays, but Apple's been working with LG to ramp them up to make OLED displays as well. And it seems like Samsung might be pitching this technology as a way to hold on to that contract.
Yeah, right. And I wonder if this would also mean 3D touch is no longer part of the display. Currently, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but what it measures underneath the display, or is it? Or between the display and the glass, the force or the distance between the two objects.
I was always under the impression that it was measuring that very slight distance between the two layers. So losing this,
right,
it might almost be a given that, yeah, you're going to lose 3D touch with this, which maybe Apple's been trying to prepare everyone for this the whole time, and they've been planning on this, and that's why they're phasing out 3D touch.
And what we're left with is haptic touch, which, judging by some of the comments in the thread, it's not the greatest replacement to 3D touch. I'm not sure how everyone's going to feel when we replace this little used technology with something that's slightly worse, and maybe even less frequently used.
Right. I'm hoping that they're starting out on the 10R as a way to kind of perfect haptic touch before they force it on their more higher end consumers. So by the time the technology is really polished and it's a good replacement across the whole OS for 3D touch, that's when the expensive flagship phones will start seeing 3D touch phased out as well. It's really too bad to see technology go, though, because haptic touch will never be a full replacement for 3D touch, and that degree of control of pressure sensitivity is really impressive. No one really utilizes it in their apps, but if you look at something like one of their 3D touch wallpapers, for instance, the amount of pressure sensitivity you have, like the harder you press, you can do it in just small increments and see the animation speed up and slow down and reverse with the amount of pressure you're using. You'll never get that with the haptic touch solution.
The only other example I can think of where the amount of pressure is measured is when you're pressing on the delete key on the keyboard, because the harder you press, the faster it deletes the characters you've typed. But besides that, I don't think, the degree. Oh, and also there are those, those apps that measure weight when you place things on your phone.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
I've never tried it. I don't even know if they're still a thing, but they made a few waves when the phone first came out with 3D touch.
Yeah, that's right. I only had one app ever in the history of 3D touch that really took advantage of it, and it was some kind of driving game. And the harder you pressed on either side, the sharper you turned in one direction or the other. It was more of a demonstration of the technology than fully realized use. But there's a lot of untapped potential in this technology. Even 4 years later, haven't seen anyone use.
Do you remember one of the flagship demonstrations when peak and pop became a thing was the Instagram app?
I don't remember the keynote specifically, but...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Instagram that was demonstrated on stage. But you can basically do more or less the same thing with Instagram on any phone you want. I mean, if you've got an iPhone 5S on Instagram, your long press will do a peek at the photo that you're looking at from the thumbnail to the big screen.
Right. I feel like some of that is Apple's fault. If they would have gone all in on 3D touch, which they never really did. There was a point where all their flagships had it, but there was never a point where all iOS devices have it, and we still never seen an iPad with it. And I think because app creators have to design their apps around the lowest common denominator, long press was always going to be the implemented solution over 3D touch. And because Apple never fully embraced it, we never saw it gain the popularity it could have.
And so if we lose 3D touch and gain a thinner display assembly, do you think we're going to get a thinner phone overall, or are we going to get a same size phone with a bigger battery? As the trend has gone since the 6S or the 7, iPhones have been getting thicker and thicker. So the 6S, was that the thinnest model we ever had?
The 6 would have been.
Yeah. So since the 6S, then the trend has been thicker.
I've been completely fine with thicker phones. I feel like they're a little easier to hold on to. I remember when I got my iPhone 5, which wasn't the thinnest phone, but it's the lightest phone they ever made, and it felt like I was holding a child's toy in my hand. It was just how light it was, which was kind of magical, but also made me worried about how durable it was. The thickness is fine as far as grip goes, but we are, I think, starting to get to that turning point again where I would not mind my phones changing direction and going thinner again, especially if we see a design leaning towards kind of what we saw in the iPad Pro this year, maybe back to more squared off edges and a focus on thinness. I would love to see that just as kind of a fresh design for the iPhone line.
And also the camera bump is something to consider as well, because if you've got the same thickness phone with a thinner display component, maybe the camera bump doesn't need to be a thing anymore, because that camera will be able to recess further into the body, still meet its minimum requirements, whatever it's set by the photography department.
Right.
And maybe sit flush with the case. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah. Actually, now that you mention it, I would take that over a thinner phone any day. Because this bump has gotten pretty bad over the last few years, and it's not constantly I use my phone flat on a desk, but when I do, it's always a nuisance. There's never a case where I don't mind it. So yeah, removing the camera bump would be way more important than thinness to me.
What you just mentioned before about the redesigned iPhone kind of flows into the next topic, which is by a Redditor called Freddie From, who says, "We get it. You like the size of your SE. No, it's not coming back, sorry." Wouldn't it be nice to have an iPhone SE body, which isn't that dissimilar from the current iPad Pro, or the latest one?
Right.
But instead have an edge-to-edge screen and modern internals.
If they could pull it off, I wonder what size screen we would be working with at that point. You think we'd be getting close to 5 inches if they could do edge-to-edge in that design?
And keeping the same width of the display?
Yeah, I guess they'd have to. If they were going to use the exact same body, the width would be about the same, but getting rid of the top and bottom.
What's the screen size of the iPhone SE at the moment?
It's 4 inches.
Is it really? That just sounds miniature, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we could get a 5-inch display, that doesn't alleviate the width though, which from what I believe, listening to quite a few developer podcasts and seeing tweets and things, developing for a display that thin is a royal pain in the derriere.
Yeah, it's definitely the lowest common denominator. Obviously, it's the smallest display, but just having content that can easily scale dynamically between something as large as a XS Max and then all the way down to the SE. Like you can easily get iPhone 6 size displays. You can scale down to that pretty easily. But yeah, as soon as you get down to something like the SE, it becomes very, very difficult to find something that looks good. You basically have to rearrange your elements at that point, and you're basically designing almost a second interface for your app around that display itself.
Yeah, it's almost a different class of display.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't think that, you're right, you wouldn't gain much just by adding vertical pixels. That would make it any easier. Would you think of, I don't know, something like an iPhone 6 size, but with the squared off edges? Do you think that would still satisfy the iPhone SE people, or do you think that size is the sweet spot, and if we go any bigger, we're still going to hear complaining?
I think if we saw the iPhone 6 size screen, edge to edge in a squared body, I don't think you'd ever hear another complaint from an SE user or an SE someone who lusted after one.
Right.
But there is the nostalgia factor to take into account as well. People are always often think back on how something good once was, but when it comes to the fact of actually using it day to day, it doesn't always live up to the expectations.
Yeah, I mean the SE is kind of the pinnacle of the design that started in 2010 with the iPhone 4. It's slightly taller, but you still basically get the idea of a stainless steel border and sandwich between not full glass on that design, but some glass on the front and back, and kind of peak Steve Jobs design. And losing the SE is kind of like the last thing he had a hand in. At the same time, I think there's still a place for a phone like that. To this day, the most comfortable phone I ever owned, at least in my opinion, for my hand size, was the Nexus 5. It was a 5-inch display. It was by no means a premium phone. The Nexus lines were known for being more of the flagship features, but in the most affordable package. And it was all plastic, but it was I don't know why, it just my hands, I guess. It was the perfect size, and I've never felt another phone that was as comfortable to hold. So I think that if Apple made a flagship around that size as well, which was similar to the SE but significantly wider, you could definitely appeal to a lot of people that way.
Can I put in my contender for most comfortable phone to hold? And there's a small asterisk in there.
Okay.
And this could even lead into our next topic. But I would say that the iPhone 6 with a battery case was my most comfortable phone to hold.
Oh, you thought the battery case made it better?
Absolutely. I mean, it didn't make it prettier, that's for sure. But so currently when I hold like an iPhone 6 size phone, the speaker grill rests on my pinky, and that's the most comfortable way to hold it, but it limits my upper reach. So my thumb is having trouble reaching the top of the screen. Right. The change when you add the battery pack to it is that the bottom of the battery pack could actually rest on your pinky, and that increases the height at which your thumb naturally sits. So I can still reach the bottom of the screen, and I can easily reach the top of the screen thanks to the camel sitting on the back of it.
Oh, interesting. I remember when that case was announced, Apple was lamented for such a hideous design. But yeah, I've never heard anything but praises from people who've actually used them.
Let's let that take us into the next topic, which is that an iPhone XS smart battery case was pictured in the fall 2018 documentation for Apple resellers. So this is the line from 9 to 5. We exclusively revealed the existence of the iPhone XS smart battery case earlier this month with assets present in iOS builds. That was an article by Guillaume. The website Appleosophy, interesting name, has spotted another occurrence in Apple's fall merchandising guidelines for resellers, and 9to5Mac has confirmed the findings as legitimate. There are a few little issues with this article. Firstly, that fall is almost over, is it not?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how your seasons run over there.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you if fall is over yet or not by our actual season guidelines, but I'd say for all intents and purposes, fall is over.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Oh yeah, fall ends on December 21st, so we still got a little bit of time technically.
So fall, so the Southern Hemisphere, well, firstly we would call fall autumn, but also it's spring. So you're saying that spring ends in a day, or today, probably when the listeners are listening to this show.
Yeah, we're right at the end. So maybe between us recording this and the show going up, Apple will release this case.
I'll sneakily edit this section out of the MP3 altogether.
On that note, Apple's been having a really hard time meeting their own deadlines. Like the iPhone XR case, that clear plastic one that they had advertised as coming out alongside the XR took, another month before they actually started selling it? And of course, the obvious case of AirPower. But yeah, now this. At least this one they didn't say it anywhere publicly, but they've been telling resellers they were going to have it, and it looks like it's yet to be seen. So
one of the other issues I had with this article is that firstly, there was only one color in the product matrix, whereas the previous battery case, we had, the matching colors with the phones.
Right.
And also, what was the other issue? Oh, right. Purportedly a case for the Max-sized phones as well. That doesn't make sense to me because, well, firstly, there was no battery case for the 6 Plus. And
right.
It doesn't strike me as something that they're going to do for the Plus size because that's going to be a monstrosity of a device once the whole thing's put together.
Maybe it'll make it just so much more comfortable to use that people will buy it just for that. Actually, my biggest concern with a case for the XS Max, not only the bigger case and battery size, but also from this image, it looks like Apple's at least playing with the idea of having these come in leather as well. This is going to be an expensive case. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see $150 for a case that big, made of leather and everything.
Oh, easily. Yeah, easily. Plus the weight of the leather, the thickness of the leather compared to silicon. It all adds up to something that doesn't sound Apple-y, although you'd be forgiven for saying the first Apple case didn't sound Apple-y before it was released as well.
And from looking at the picture, of course, they have to push the hump down a little bit because of the camera notch now being more vertical.
That's right. So if it is announced, then you lose the pinky.
You're still not going to be able to get that thumb reach that you liked so much.
Yeah. Which is even more necessary now with the display all the way to the top and control center sitting up there.
Oh, yeah. So I'll be interested to see if we ever actually see these. Although, with the fact they're already sending it out to third-party retailers saying that these exist, it seems like it's a given we're going to see these at some point.
My last issue in the long list of issues I have with this potentially existing is, will it have wireless charging in the case? The hump itself, I'm not sure it's big enough to have a regular-sized Qi coil in there. So if it doesn't have that and AirPower doesn't exist yet, will it have wireless charging?
So from not this article, but the prior article, we got kind of a view of what the front of the case looked like, and it no longer had that slightly thick chin that the original smart battery case had, which made me wonder if this case has space in the bottom for the lightning connector components, or if this case possibly charges your phone entirely using Qi charging, which seems like a bad idea if you're trying to get the most battery life as possible out of a case, to use an inefficient charging method like that. But they've either really optimized that space down there to have not only the lightning connector to go into your phone, but also a pass-through lightning connector, or they're really heavily banking on wireless for this case.
And the only problem I have with the idea of it Qi charging the phone is, how does the power get back to the battery to charge that?
The case charges wirelessly as well? I don't know.
Back from the iPhone. So I'm not sure if Qi can do that.
There's a Huawei
mutual
phone,
exchange of energy.
The Huawei Mate 20 Pro that can charge devices from the phone as well as charging the phone with the Qi coils.
Really?
Yeah, apparently it's like the smallest trickle of a charge you can get from the phone, and it's barely usable if you're trying to charge another device and not a small accessory. But yeah, the technology, it's possible. No one uses it, though.
And it would already have to be in the phones if this was a thing.
Right. So, although if this is another companion accessory that maybe is meant to accompany AirPower, like the wireless charging AirPods case, maybe this could be potentially a hint towards AirPower coming sooner than later. I feel like at this point Apple is going to be pressured to make some kind of statement, since up to this point they've only definitively said it's coming in 2018. I know they don't owe us anything, they don't have to say anything, but usually, like in the case of AirPods getting delayed, when they missed their window, they came out and said, hey, we need some more time to perfect this. So maybe we'll see something by the end of the year, at least to the effect of what's going on with AirPower.
Well, there hasn't been any precedent set for AirPower, at least.
Mm-hmm.
We would have hoped for something before now. Yeah, it's a strange one. But they still have 9 odd days to get something out. Maybe it's Happy Christmas for everyone. Hey, AirPower, AirPods charging case, battery case that charges wirelessly in 2 directions.
Oh man, that would be an exciting announcement just to drop out of nowhere.
Yeah, that'd certainly be a Christmas present. Although terribly timed because all the Christmas buying is going to be over by then.
Right. Well, it's like what they did with the AirPods themselves. They officially launched them in time for the holiday season, but they had such limited stock it was effectively not out yet.
Right, yeah. Yeah. And I don't think they ever would have lived to regret that because they sold so well for many months following the launch.
Some places, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's definitely been one of their better selling products of the last few years.
Speaking of audio, the next topic was a self-post by Soramac who says Apple's audio engineers deserve some appreciation. And I think he's talking about basically any Apple product released in the last 5 years has had some incredible audio. Starting with improvements to, I want to say, the new MacBook Pros. And the audio out of those is incredible. Mm-hmm. And then we've got HomePod, you've got AirPods, you've got the new iPhones and your iPad, basically the entire matrix. Can't call it a quadrant, I'll just call it a matrix. Has had incredible bumps in audio quality.
Yeah, I was blown away when the iPad Pro launched a few years back with the 4 speakers and just the amount of sound they could have a tablet. Not to mention just, I won't say unrivaled, but extremely high-level consumer audio in the HomePod. And even just some of the more subtle things like how well the Apple Watch handles phone calls. I don't use my Apple Watch for phone calls very often, but when I do, the people on the other end can never tell I'm using an Apple Watch. To them, it sounds like I'm holding a phone to my mouth. So the fact that they're able to isolate audio that well is impressive.
That's to do with the input as well. So do you think the microphone and the inputs have also improved on par with the output?
I would maybe say a bit towards microphone technology, and a lot of that specifically is thanks to audio processing and their ability to isolate specific frequencies or use multiple microphones for noise cancellation. They've definitely gotten better at that and are probably, if not in the front, leading the pack in audio, both in and out.
And it might just have something to do with a certain audio engineer known as Tomlinson Holman, was employed by Apple in 2011. Are you familiar with this name?
Only because I read the comments.
For anyone that's not, Tomlinson Holman had a little experiment which became THX. So if you're familiar with can you do it with your nice baritone voice?
Oh no, there's no way.
No.
I'm not even going to try.
All right. I think everyone knows the THX sound they often get at the start of certain movies. But he was the man behind that. He had a lot to do with George Lucas when George Lucas was on fire back in the day.
Yep.
And he was employed by Apple in 2011. So it coincides nicely with him joining Apple, and then a few years later we start to see all these improvements. I put a small bit of money on that he was involved with them all.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have nothing but praise. I think Apple's speakers across the market in any category lead that category. So he's definitely to thank. Kind of, man, this is a stretch to try to make these things related. but famous audio engineer, in my mind, for some reason, ties into famous designer. I don't know if you saw this the other day, but I thought it was interesting. One of the lead designer of the firm that does industrial design for the Beats headphones worked for Apple in the 90s. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that, yeah.
Yeah, and he was the man who hired Johnny Ive and then soon after left the company and is now kind of working for them again by proxy by doing the industrial design for the Beats headphones.
Right.
So I don't know how I made that connection in my head, but yeah.
It's a nice little infinite loop.
Infinite loop. Anyway, I thought that was a cool little tidbit.
Can I take a moment just to complain about my AirPods?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I'm not enjoying AirPods recently. I think I even mentioned this last show that I don't get like even audio in my ears anymore, mostly due to fit. But
right.
Even to get like a decent level of audio, this really came to the fore recently because I was traveling last week. So, you're always listening to something when you're on a plane or on a train or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any level of background noise, like walking through a city or even on a train, on a quiet train, my AirPods need to be almost cranked to maximum volume for me to understand a podcast. Music's not as bad, obviously, because, you don't have to understand every word and you're normally familiar with it. But to get like a listenable level from a voice, for an understandable level of volume, it's near the top. And the detractor from that, the downside, is that I'm burning through the battery in these things in no time. I think I'm getting probably an hour and a half out of them now, compared to the 4 or so hours when they were fresh out of the box.
And is this audio thing a new issue for you, or have you always had to have them turned up quite a bit?
I would say it's been becoming progressively worse over time. And I've looked this up, and people say, suck on them to get the earwax out, clean them with the Q-tip and all that.
Right.
And I've tried it, believe me.
Right.
And they don't look dirty, at least to the outside. I'm not sure if I'm going to open them up and just find them completely gunked up. But to first appearances and close-ish inspection, they don't look too bad. They don't look like, they're gunked up. I'm
similarly frustrated with my AirPods. I'm not having the audio issue that you're having, but battery life in itself I'm experiencing very similar, about hour and a half battery life on my AirPods, which I think we're just kind of getting to that point now. It's been a couple years. I think the batteries in these are like 100 milliamp hours, and they've just kind of
I think they're 30 actually.
Or 30. Okay, I was way off.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we might just be getting to the point where we're hitting the life of these batteries, and there's not much that can be done besides buying new headphones, which is a little frustrating at the price point they are. But if they get better with every iteration, hopefully we'll see a new version in this coming year, and I don't have to buy AirPods every 2 or 3 years. I think I'm okay with that shelf life for now.
Yeah, it's not too bad. But it's the question of, do you grab some new AirPods now, or do you just hold out and wait to see if anything's released?
Yeah, that's definitely the big question, especially because they've already like teased not full new AirPods, but like, hey, AirPods are coming with this new case, and they did that so long ago now. It feels like, why would you buy these when they've already announced what's coming next?
Yeah. One option, of course, is to take them into the Genius Bar and get the actual pods replaced. I'm not sure how economical that turns out to be compared to buying a whole new pair.
I think the savings is very minimal, and you still end up with your old case. So I'd rather pay the extra, whatever, $20 or $30 and have a new battery in my case as well.
And of course, replacing them one by one would mean you'd get great battery life out of one and terrible out of the other, which is kind of the boat I'm in at the moment, because I do use them a lot for calls, and activating the microphone just destroys the battery life. So, after 3 years of calls, how long have they been out? Is it 3 years?
With the iPhone 7, so 2.5 years?
Yeah, okay, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But my right AirPod will always run out of battery first.
Huh. I think I'm mostly okay, because when they worked well, they worked really well, and were definitely the best headphones I've ever owned. And I'd say even up to this point, they're still the best headphones I've ever owned, even with their issues. So having to replace them every few years, I think, is a fair trade-off in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. I tried to think about what would be a replacement for them, and nothing would come to mind at all.
Yeah, there's still nothing on the market that competes, I think, feature for feature with the AirPods. There's wireless headphones, but nothing like this.
Yeah, there are certainly good over-the-ear wireless headphones, but I actually use like one in my ear often, like lying in bed, one ear on the pillow, one AirPod in. So there's no way that like an over-the-head pair would work, or nearly any other pair of wireless headset.
I've been looking into over-the-ear headphones, specifically for when we're recording our podcast, and I've been really impressed by Microsoft's Surface headphones. Have you seen those?
No, I haven't.
Oh, man. Sounds like they're really putting like companies like Bose and Sony, giving them a run for their money. Some really nice, I think they're like maybe $300 over-the-ear headphones with active noise cancellation, and each drum over the speakers has a dial. The whole thing is a dial. One ear controls the volume of your playback, and one dial controls the amount of active noise cancellation, which you can turn it all the way up, or you can turn it negative so it amplifies outside audio to keep you aware of your surroundings. And they have new technologies like USB-C, which is something you would hope to see in all headphones, but Microsoft's pretty much the only company that does that right now. And they work with any voice assistant, so you can use Siri with them, which is nice for someone with an iPhone.
Right, so whatever device they're paired with, like the voice assistant button doesn't do anything crazy like pull up Cortana on everything.
Right. Yeah.
Just activates the native one.
Yeah, which I'm not sure wireless headphones are the solution I'm looking for, but I was impressed enough by them that just to have around, I've been considering picking up a pair.
Yeah, I haven't seen them in the wild, but I might keep an eye out for them. They sound pretty good. Speaking of music, did you notice that Apple Music Connect has shut down? Apple Music Connect has shut down.
I didn't even notice that was still a thing for the last year.
I noticed because I spent a little bit of time in the For You tab in Apple Music, and I noticed that you would often see things that were years old posted by artists. So That's why I took notice, because it was just ridiculous that you had these ancient updates from your artists on the For You tab if you scroll far enough.
Yeah, well, Connect used to be much more prominent in the first version of Apple Music. It wasn't just at the bottom of the For You tab. I think it had its own tab. So Apple's already been pushing this to the background since it was launched. And it's not a surprise that it died, especially if you can remember back just a few years to Ping.
Yes, I remember Ping. I even had a few friends on Ping.
Really? I've the only friend I have in Connect or that I'm following is you.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know anyone else that uses
No,
it.
I'm not on Connect though. I'm just like an Apple Music friend.
Right, yeah. It's not a full social network, but I mean as far as following someone at all within the music app, yeah, you're my only semblance of a friend. But yeah, the same issue that Ping had, Connect is having, and that's first of all finding a decent use for it. The idea of connecting people to artists is interesting if artists actually use it and have interesting things to share, and not just check out my new album, which everyone's already doing. So I'm not sure I've ever completely understood the need for a full music-centered social network.
Right. So, in my opinion, what's running right now, like today, which is not Ping, which is not Apple Music Connect, it's just the social features in Apple Music. Mm-hmm. I think it's the best they've actually ever done. So Connect was to connect the artist with the listener, and right now it's more of a free-for-all. It's more of like a peer-to-peer, although artists still have functions like creating their own playlists and sharing them, just like users. So you can share, you can follow a playlist that an artist has made, you can follow a playlist that a friend of yours had made. You get the Friends Mix. Have you seen that? The Apple Music playlist. What's it called? I think it's just called My Friends Mix. And it just is an updating playlist of what your friends are listening to.
Maybe it's because I don't have enough friends, but I don't see that.
Okay. And you also get like this carousel in the For You tab of albums your friends are listening to.
Right.
So to me, this is the best I've ever done. And it's not... I think the main problem from day one, from Ping, from Connect, from now, is discoverability is so low because most people spend their time in the library tab. right?
Right.
They're not scrolling through for you, halfway down the page. The browse tab's even like a third-class citizen to that.
Right.
Just like you said, not long after Connect was launched, the prominence of the feature was already on the decline almost from day one. And even from day one, it wasn't all that discoverable. It wasn't in your face when you open the music app, which is what it needed if it needed to go anywhere.
Well, I do remember setting up my Apple Music account. I had to like select artists to follow. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I didn't think that was to follow them on Connect. I thought that was just to personalize your playlist recommendations.
Well, there was definitely a page of just like choosing the type of music you like for recommendation. But it also gave the option to follow artists. And that is how I followed everyone that I ever followed on Connect, and I've never discovered or been able to add anyone else. So,
okay.
The interesting kind of takeaway I had from this article, almost unrelated, but they quote this letter that Apple sent out to artists, updating them on the status of Connect, and they mention specifically the Apple Music for Artists app, which I'm curious what that looks like. That artists have their own version of the Apple Music app, and I imagine to them it looks a little bit more like a social network platform that they can make posts and things like that, which would be interesting to see at least.
Yeah, I wonder what it takes to get a hold of that.
Yeah, I wonder if Apple specifically reaches out to like record labels and it's like, here's the link to our beta for this app and get all your artists to download it. And yeah, that was the most interesting takeaway I had. Not that Connect mattered.
Another little tidbit from the article is that they've added a new feature called Personalized Artist Radio. So that's on the artist page now. You can kick off a radio station based on, I'm not sure what the artist listens to, or
similar to that artist, I'm not sure.
Yeah, something like that.
Or if it's something the artist kind of curates themselves, like this is the type of music I want playing on my radio station.
Right, yeah. Although they can already make their artist playlists.
Right.
Did you know that you can actually share playlists with people and keep them updated? Because I'm constantly seeing comments on Reddit that, Spotify's way ahead because you can share playlists with people. Well, guess what? You have been with Apple Music since like day 2 as well.
Huh. I think the problem with Apple Music versus Spotify and a lot of those arguments is discoverability of those features. Things that are prominent in Spotify, Apple Music can do, but they don't make a big deal out of, and people don't realize it can do it.
From the people what's the kind of ratio of Apple Music to Spotify?
As far as I know, I'm the only one that uses Apple Music.
Okay.
Like everyone else in my group of friends or coworkers, all use Android devices and have been on Spotify, since basically day one, and Apple Music and Apple specifically is just kind of a joke to them. So that's what drew me to this podcast a year ago, is being able to talk to someone about Apple, because I don't have anyone in my life like that.
Yeah, I talk to people about Apple, but they don't normally talk back to me about it.
What about you? Do you have more Apple Music users in your life?
Yeah, well, my entire family is Apple Music. I don't think I know. All my close friends, I think, are on Apple Music now.
Oh, really?
They've made the jump. I have to say, I've never, ever seen an Android user use Apple Music.
Yeah, I haven't either.
That's the white rhino. Yet to find it.
I think Apple Music definitely has some compelling offerings over Spotify, and at this point you're seeing just kind of a fanboyishness of Apple Music versus Spotify, the same as you'd see as just Apple versus Android. People have their camps, they have what they're used to, and either side could have a compelling offer, but it doesn't matter because you just inherently dislike the other side of the argument. So I don't think you're going to see many converts, especially on the Android platform itself.
Yeah, there's a lot of inertia when it comes to what you've been using to what you continue to use.
Yeah, music is such a personal thing to people. Trying to migrate playlists, I think there's tools to do it, but still, it's a bigger deal to some people than it is to me to have all their music organized exactly right.
Yeah, absolutely. I never jumped on the Spotify train because I had all my albums in iTunes at the time, or the music app. I didn't want to manage 2 libraries worth of music and playlists. So Apple Music was just the natural choice. And I think for a lot of the people around me, they hadn't even made the jump to streaming music when Apple Music was announced. So then there was no history to bring across.
Right.
It was just kind of, it was there. It was, the inherent advantage of Apple Music is it was just a big button in the music app to join when it was released.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely the boat I found myself in. I'd played around on Spotify, but not actually actively used it or even ever paid for a membership.
Anything else to say about Apple Music? I think that's our last topic.
Yeah, I think that about covers it.
All right. Well, I am James VDM on Reddit and on Twitter.
And I'm Jellywoot on Reddit and Twitter. And I'm curious about your keyboard.
Yeah, well, I'd normally also mention that we're on Patreon, the much unloved Patreon page, patreon.com/TheAppleShow. And yeah.
Jump the horse. Okay.
I'm waiting for you to add something to the post-show topics list.
Okay. I can start coming up with extra things.
I was just wondering if you would, but mine is my horrendous keyboard on my MacBook Pro.
Has it gotten worse?
Or my keyboard. That was not a typo. My O key just does not work anymore. So
Oh.
yeah, I've lost it.
And that's after a replacement from Apple.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the frustrating thing, is that, I bought this, was it 2016 MacBook Pro non-touch bar from new, and then for, years almost, I heard these complaints about the keyboards failing, and mine was solid as a rock. I had the baby food incident. I had all sorts of very, very temporary keys stop working, mostly keys you don't really need, like function keys. Mm-hmm. Finally, it gave out, and I got it replaced. And I think it was within 2 weeks of getting it replaced. Mm-hmm. And after I got it replaced, I have to say, I treated it with a little bit more respect. But it was already acting up since then. And I don't think there's been a period since then where I've had a fully functioning keyboard. It's incredibly frustrating.
I wonder if them opening up your computer to replace the keyboard inherently got more dust in the case to make it break easier in the future.
Yeah, that could be it. I'd be surprised, though. I mean, is it dust that does it? I thought it was more like crumbs or sand or, something with a little bit more substance to it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. My understanding was that it was, very fine particle that could even be dust, depending on how it gets into the mechanism.
Okay.
But
right.
You wouldn't expect that. You'd expect the keyboard to be more durable than that.
Yeah.
So are you considering taking it back? Is that even an option?
Well, every time a key has failed, I've started the process of looking for a Genius appointment, blah, blah, blah. And then by the time it rolls around, the key is resolved itself. And that's the most frustrating part, because you take it into them and they say, no, the key's working fine. Bring it back when it's not working.
You should take your computer to the beach and just throw some sand on it and then take it in.
Actually, I think right now, case in point, my O is working perfectly. Like every touch, it's working. Whereas I've just been struggling horrendously for the past 3 days with no O key.
The working inconsistently is, definitely more frustrating than just something not working entirely, especially when you're trying to make a case to have it replaced again. Have we heard how effective this third generation keyboard with a membrane has been at preventing this kind of issue, or are people still reporting similar issues with these new computers?
I've certainly heard a few rumblings about it not being as good, but they're certainly quieter than before, although it is much earlier in the piece. They've only been out for months, not counting it in the years yet.
Right. And I've been fortunate enough that my 2017 MacBook Pro hasn't experienced similar issues yet, although I very rarely use it.
Yeah, I was going to say,
as a laptop.
You don't use it, so...
Yeah, I very rarely use it, period. And when I do use it, it's usually closed and plugged into a monitor. So I've either protected it by doing that, or I just haven't noticed how bad it is getting. So...
And the other problem with it failing right now is with all the Christmas holidays just around the corner, the chance I'm taking it in and then not getting it back until the last few days of between Christmas and New Year's, or just after New Year's. And of course, I'm working over the break, so
right.
I'm not sure if it's a risk I'm quite willing to take.
Did I see you did a bit of traveling recently?
Yeah, I had an office Christmas party. My office is in Sydney, so that's about 4.5 hours on a plane. Yeah.
Oh man, how far is that if you wanted to drive all the way to Sydney?
Well, I've done it before. It's a long drive. I think it's probably around 3,000 k's. That might be to Melbourne, but it's reasonably close by. But yeah, you'd want to settle into it for about a 5-day drive, just at a guess.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's not short.
Yeah, that was a bit more than I anticipated. I was expecting maybe a couple days.
You might be able to push it in 4.
Man, well, it looks like you guys had a good time out at Sydney, just from following your Instagram.
Yeah, it was nice. The office splashed out. Instead of the usual sit down at a restaurant, we were on a boat, a ferry type thing, and just cruised around the Sydney harbour, under the bridge, past the Opera House a few times.
Oh, very nice.
The weather didn't really hold up, but there's plenty of cover on a big boat, so it was still a really good trip.
What is weather like this time of year in Australia?
Well, I can speak mostly for Perth, so the other side of the country.
Mm-hmm.
We typically have like mid to high 30s on Christmas Day.
Okay.
And I'd say the average is probably high 20s, although it gets a lot hotter in January and then even hotter in February. You can have heat waves of high 30s for a week, that type of thing. Sorry, I'm talking in Celsius, so it probably doesn't make any sense to you.
I'm making these conversions in my head fairly quickly. I'm trying to, at least.
Okay. So when I say high 30s, I'm probably saying around 100 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's
for everyone else
around here.
Yeah. Yeah, so Christmas Day is often close to 100, if not over.
Wow. This is a little abnormal year for us. Like this year, I'm trying to do this, 10. It's around 10 degrees. So 50-ish degrees for us, which is very, very warm for this time of year for us. Usually we're negative, up to -10 and mostly snow all season. But these last few years it's been fairly warm. So which -10 for you is still fairly warm compared to us.
Yeah.
So what would that be, like -30 for us? For you? I'm not sure how that conversion works. I know there's a point you go far enough negative, they end up equaling out.
Right, yeah.
Because your zeros are 32
minus
degrees.
30, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know. It seems to be at minus 30 is minus 34C, so...
Pretty close.
Yeah. Oh, minus 40 is minus 40. There you go. That's the equivalent.
But yeah, so I've been enjoying the warm 10-degree weather here. It's been great.
Yeah, sounds nice. And it's already snowed?
It snowed once. There was a pretty big blizzard that swept across the country. I think I had 6 or 7 inches of snow. But that's been the only snow we've had, and it melted within a few days. But I'm used to.
So no white Christmas.
It's not looking like it right now. Which is what I was used to growing up. Was definitely, once late November, December started, it was basically the snow on the ground through January or February. But those were a long time ago. The world has changed. Snow is probably a pretty rare occurrence for you, right?
Rare? I don't think it's ever snowed in Perth. Ever.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I guess.
No. If it hits 0, if it hits freezing point, that's rare. You'll do it once or twice in the winter.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I think in my whole state, if it snows anywhere in the state, it's a massive state, by the way.
Right.
That's newsworthy. It will be on the news if it snows anywhere. And
how prepared to handle snow? Like, does just like a slight dusting like shut everything down over there?
Well, if it's never snowed in the city. It's never snowed in a metropolitan area.
Okay.
I think it would only snow on top of a high peak, and that would make the news. So,
okay.
So there is zero preparedness for snow. You would not find a snowplow or anything of that nature in the city.
So, even in some of the farther south states here, who get snow, like every other year or so, there's just slightest hint of snow will completely shut down all business in that state. So, it's funny to me, not even being a northern state, but semi halfway up the country, seeing how they react.
If it snowed here, nothing would get done because everyone would just be outside playing in the snow.
Oh, you'd have to. Such a once in a lifetime thing.
It would be, yeah. So I guess we don't really have anything special lined up for the 25th show, but the 26th show is going to be a big one.
Are we just gonna leave it at that and make them wait and find out?
That's the teaser.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, well, you have a Merry Christmas.
Hey, you too, James.
And talk to you in the new year.
All right, have a good one.
All right, see ya.